Just want to make sure that everyone gets on first. Awesome. Awesome. Well, I think everyone is here. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. I really appreciate everyone being here, our speakers, our just people tuning in to listen in. Welcome back. I know it's kind of we didn't have a meeting last Monday. Everything's a blur right now. But thank you guys very much for joining in. Tonight is our sports broadcasting panel. Trevor will be moderating. Once again, thank you, Trevor, for doing this. But I'm gonna introduce a couple of our speakers real quick for tonight. Um, Tonight we have Kyle Barker speaking for us a little bit about what he does. He is um, kind of a coordinator, broadcast and multimedia productions here at Niagara. He's kind of a director. He does all sorts of stuff. He's also one of our own. So Kyle, thank you for being here. We also had David Tasca. I said that right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, David, for being here. He is currently the producer and director, also at Niagara. He does a little bit of what Kyle does. Kyle does a little bit of what he does. So, David, thank you for being here. And we also have, and I'm going to butcher it again, but Chris Aliano, correct? I hope. And Chris does the same kind of stuff that they do, but he does it at St. Peter's University. So Chris, thank you for being here with us. And Trevor, I'll toss it over to you whenever you're ready.
Cool. Okay, perfect. I'm not happy I didn't get that fancy introduction with all my titles and sophomore at night. No, I'm just kidding. But well, first and foremost, thank you to all of our speakers for being here today. And thank you for all of our students and alumni for joining. But I'll kind of get right into things so we can kind of take care of everyone's time. But our first question for tonight is, what do you think is the biggest challenge facing the sport broadcasting industry today?
Who wants that?
I'll tell you what, it's changing drastically. I'm going to be completely honest with you. It is changing drastically. 5 years ago, when students were graduating, there was plenty of jobs out there. And the major networks were producing all their own products. ESPN, Fox, and now the landscape has changed. Fox regionals no longer exist. They're now Valley Sports regionals, okay? And each one of those regionals is run a little bit differently. So if you can find a job at one of those regionals doing camera, whatever, anything in the field, by all means do so. Because I'm going to be honest with you, ESPN is leaning heavily on the schools to produce product for them. So that's the reason why, Michael, you've worked so much during this past year, and Kyle has worked so much during this past year, and Chris has worked so much during this past year. And I will be completely honest with you, that work is only going to increase because ESPN is getting away from producing their own product and sending out production trucks. They're really trying to get away from that. They are trying to use packagers to produce their products, and they're leaning heavily on the schools to produce product. So there's a lot of people that have been displaced because of it. Yours truly is one of them. I worked at ESPN for 18 years. I lost my job in January. So this business is changing drastically. Now, am I saying there's no jobs out there? No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying the landscape has changed. Normally, you know, what the best thing about you guys doing stuff at Niagara is you got a 4-letter word on your resume, ESPN, and that is huge. I mean, there's just not a lot of places where you can get that name on your resume, which is great. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a job at ESPN, but it could mean that you get a job somewhere else. Turner, the rumor is today, Turner is going to sign with the NHL. So Turner now has gone from 5 years ago doing nothing to now doing Major League Baseball, the NHL, and they have the rights for the NCAA tournament. So guess where you should apply to. But yes, this field is changing drastically. NBC now will no longer have NHL product after this year, which is amazing, considering they've had it for the past 14 years.
I'm not sure the audience of who we're talking to, whether they're recent alums, whether it's current students. I'm sure it's a mixture of both, but I'm sure one of the biggest buzzwords you often hear is content, right? Hashtag content, and how it comes in many, many, many forms. But we're all trying to feed the content beast right now. And ESPN, if you go back to when they originally struck that deal with all these conferences, in advance of the launch of ESPN Plus, the digital app, and all the, ESPN3 and the evolution there. It was, way back then, it was the first domino to fall, and them expecting the schools to feed the content beast on their behalf. So like Dave said, they didn't have to send out production trucks, to produce all these different events at all these, hundreds of colleges across the country. And I think that's how I view it. I graduated college 10 years ago this May, which sucks to say out loud. But literally in just the last 5 years alone, and I've worked in college athletics since then, I've, had the fortune of being at kind of the smaller shops, Bryant for a year, Merrimack for 7 years, and St. Peter's the last 2. So that smaller Division I mid-major, however you want to phrase it. But, we've all been, my departments have been responsible for, producing that content and the broadcast production. And now, I arrived at, in the MAC 2 years ago, and these ESPN, production standards and getting this, it's great. But you have to realize that, we're all being expected, at least at the school level, at the granular level, to do jobs that before 10, 15 years ago, the Dave Tascos of the world did, professionals that, were outsourced from ESPN that worked for ESPN. So now we're expected to kind of emulate these, professional production truck crews, with students who are doing it for the first time. And it's great and it's a lot of fun, but like Dave said, it's only going to get, the workload's only going to increase. You got to really love to embrace the grind, and it's certainly one of the biggest challenges I think we're all facing right now. And I know Kyle and I talked over the summer about it and how the hell do we keep up with it, but
Yeah,
you got to embrace the grind, man.
I remember that phone call. I was panicking, like, how are we going to do all these sports in 4 or 5 months? And there's a couple of familiar faces on here, and I'm biased, but we've handled it greatly. So I think that, honestly, right now, the hardest thing for me in August was the pandemic. It was kind of all I knew, because Niagara is kind of the only thing I know. I went there, stayed there. I have this job here now. So in my world, the pandemic was like the hardest thing for me to kind of navigate the waters on. Where Chris and David have this background experience, when ESPN struck this deal, this is the only thing I kind of know, right? So, okay, we got to get this game to ESPN today. How do we do it? On the flip side, though, to what Dave and Chris have said, about the past, I would argue that because of the changes that's being made and the more games that we're required to do at the schools and the more students that are working on shows, the flip side to that and the positive, in my opinion, is that the technology is getting better, which makes it easier for us to do this many shows at a time, or this heavy load of a schedule. There's amazing pieces of product out there that help us do what we do. So if I'm turning a negative into a positive, that would be how I would phrase it. We have some amazing pieces of product that allows us to do what we do, and allows you to students to really get experience on that stuff. And it's only going to grow and get easier from here.
Kyle, thank you for leaving us on a positive note. Appreciate that. But I guess I'll get right into the next question. With the ability to live stream sports is becoming much more popular, and it's kind of become more of the norm for society. But how have you had to adjust to evolve to this new style of broadcasting?
Okay, so yeah, I'm the old guy of the group, so yes, I've had to make the most adjustment without a doubt. But I'll recognize what Kyle said and agree to it to this point. When you walked in a production truck 10 years ago, you had to know a little bit about the technology of what was in the truck and the equipment that you were using. Uh, the equipment now going into these schools is definitely user friendly. So that makes it actually a little bit easier to do. So I will definitely agree with Kyle that the equipment is definitely more user friendly. And I think a lot of that has to do with your question, which is streaming. Um, ESPN recognized 7 years ago that that's where this was going. They recognized they were not going to be able to make the millions upon millions of dollars that they had been getting from the satellite and cable companies because people weren't going to pay that kind of price for cable and satellite anymore. However, they were willing to pay a little bit to stream. And the ESPN Plus platform has blown up, just absolutely blown up. And it's been a major source of revenue for ESPN. So they were smart to get ahead of it. And because they've gotten ahead of it, not only has it helped ESPN, but it's also helped, hopefully has and will help everyone on this call, because that means that the schools are producing so much more product. There's so much more chances as a student to work on a production, to really get to know what to do, because it's not just one or two productions. I mean, it's a lot of productions that are happening, and it's happening because of streaming. If it wasn't for streaming, this wouldn't be happening. So that's how it's really impacted everyone in a definite positive form. I think everybody on this call.
At the end of the day, I go back to the question itself here, how we had to evolve. Parents, everyone expects everything to be streamed now. They don't care what your
Yeah.
they don't care what your resources are. They don't care what your facility situation is. And without having made the trip up to beautiful Niagara U, I think I can safely say we have the worst facilities. At least, no, I'm not even going to say at least outdoor. We have the worst facilities in the conference. So my soccer field is just that. It's at a county park. There's two outlets. Thankfully, I was able to get the one plug I needed and a crazy hotspot to at least do soccer on ESPN. But before that, and even again this spring, people are going to want to stream no matter, and parents aren't going to want to hear your sob stories. They're not going to want to empathize with you. They're going to want to see their kid go 0 for 8 in a combined doubleheader for a 2-win baseball team. And that's fine because we have the resources to do that. We have the means to do that. Going back to the technology piece, like we are more equipped to take a pretty damn good camera and a capture device and a good MacBook Pro or a good streaming laptop and put it together and give you what did Dave and Steve always say? Kyle, clock and score and camera one, the most important things, right? We could at the very least always give parents clock, score, camera one, and hopefully a play-by-play guy. For soccer, yes. Sure. But listen, all I've been doing this spring for baseball, softball, where I literally have a plug and a hotspot. I can't get a van down there, and I have a backstop. I've got no camera platforms, no elevation besides a rinky-dink press box that we wheel back and forth between. I've just got a fixed home plate camera with a score bug and an ambient noise mic. And oh my God, it's like it's revolutionary. People are so happy that we're doing it for the first time. I've got to obviously keep going from there. But I think back to what the second question is, how we had to evolve. We just have it. I'm not trying to sound negative, but the expectations now in 2021, even if you're literally in the middle of a river, doing a crew race, there are means to supply power and to give a computer internet, and they want to see what that event is.
I mean, I'll tailor off that. We have some venues that are great, and then we have our softball venue where I only have one plug to plug in stuff to. And we were able to make a multi-camera shoot work at softball miraculously. I'm amazed that the power is even able to suffice that we do it. But the expectation is there. And, once you hit that Division I athletics, stature, parents expect the product so that they can be able to watch their kids play. And especially this year, I think especially was just so tough because not only could parents not attend events, Some schools weren't allowing it at all. Some schools have started to migrate and allowing fans and parents in. We just did. So, there's no other way to get into the game, and there's no other way for them to watch it other than our department. And that's a lot of responsibility on us, especially, right? You can get up and running, but sometimes there's a problem and you got to fix the problem, which makes it even more stressful and more impactful that you get your work done. And I mean, with the technology advancements, it allows you to do multiple things at once. So a couple of the kids on here know, we'll be doing an ESPN lacrosse game, but we still have the capabilities to get softball on our website. It's just because that technology advanced allows us to do it off of a jetpack, like a hotspot. Chris, I didn't even know you were doing soccer off a hotspot to ESPN. That's incredible.
Well, as you witnessed firsthand, the one day I had to pull the plug. That sucked, but you got to roll with it. It wound up on our website because transmission wouldn't let me on. It was a simple setting thing with those damn encoders, but you got to roll with it because the refs aren't going to stop and wait for you to figure it out. The parents aren't going to wait for you to figure it out. The games are going to keep going, so you got to roll with it.
And Twitter's a great place to say, "Hey, we're not on ESPN. We're on our website." They'll find it. They'll find it quickly. If they're that engaged and that in tune with what's going on, they'll find it. So you just got to make a change on the fly.
I just know for the 8th grade team that I coached this year, we had to have at least 5 people holding their phones at different camera angles. We needed someone always having a camera on the score. And then on the website, you could see 2 of this angle, 2 of this angle on the scoreboard all at once. It was like we would draft parents from all the other teams. So those parents they're relentless. They want to watch their broadcasts.
Yep.
Even if it's for 8th grade kids that don't even know how to play basketball, but it keeps it entertaining. So a lot of us on this call are going to pretty much know a decent bit of what Kyle kind of goes through day to day in this question. But I guess the question is, what does your day to day look like on a game day on your job?
Depends on which job. Okay, so if I'm at Niagara, and I would imagine Chris will similar to this. I'm not going to answer for Chris; he will too. When you're doing a school production, it's not as long of a day as it would be if you're doing a network production. If I'm working for ESPN or CBS or NBC, I'm there 7 to 8 hours before tip or before puck drop. Okay. And we need that time to build the graphics on all the players. We need that time to build packages on the players that we're going to talk about in the open. And I need that time to talk to the announcers who I probably will see for the very first time, either at their home or in person, so that we know exactly what we're going to do going into a broadcast. Okay. When you're doing an ESPN Plus or ESPN3, it might be 3 hours, it might be 4 hours, it might be a little bit less. It all depends on what happened the night before, how many productions are going on, how many announcers you have, what kind of production it is. The more you do in the open, the more you have to have time to produce that open. The less you do in an open, the less time you need to produce that open. So it completely varies depending on the job that you're doing. So Kyle will tell you a little bit more about what he does on a normal game.
Go ahead, Kyle. That was a nice segue. Let's keep it Niagara because my situation is so ass backwards. So let's stay with a normal situation. We'll do the normal Niagara situation, nice and buttoned up, and then
I have those days too. My day starts bright and early. It starts a lot earlier than a lot of people may think. It's a 7 o'clock game. You're probably there by 2 o'clock. Nope. I'm there. Sometimes by 8, 9. 10 is late in my world to get there for games like that. And a lot of times it just depends on how many students I can get that, if it fits in their class schedule, can they help me? And we go and we set everything up. We set every camera up. We set every wire up, everything that we need, comms, monitors, microphones, you name it. whatever we need, we plan it out and we go set it up. And I always say this, in my day, I always try to plan my day an hour, or how would I say this? I always try to give myself an hour more than I think I need, because if I get there and something's wrong, well, that hour that I was going to take to kind of just veg and relax before, we get rolling with an ESPN production, I now have that hour to fix that problem. And it's an awful feeling when you get there and you have to fix a problem in 30 seconds. It's a terrible feeling. But that's typically what my day will look like on a broadcast day, which we've had a lot of those in the past 60 days. We counted, our broadcaster Frank counted yesterday, had 45 shows in 60 days. So there's not a lot of sit at your desk and just kind of edit a few videos kind of day. In the summertime and, when there's not sports going on, yeah, I'm there, I'm editing, I'm making different content that we may want to use for next season. But on a game day, it's hectic and stressful. And it's funny, for me, if I have a kid that's working a game for the first time and say it's a 1 o'clock or, say it's a 7 o'clock game. And I say, okay, crew calls at 4 o'clock. They're baffled that it's a 4 o'clock crew call. Huh? Why? Why we gotta be there 3 hours early? But then they get there and they see how much the students that have worked a few games are doing. And then it clicks like, oh, that's why we need to be here 3 hours before, because that's just what it takes. It's just what it takes. And I don't know who's helping you mainly, Chris. I'm sure some students help on your shows, but it's probably similar to my day, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I was just going to preface what I say by, Kyle, you got up and running. Your first year of School Produced Productions was 1920, right? Alongside us.
Yes. Yes.
So our two wonderful institutions just played it nice and slow, but
Yes.
we waited to the last year to be up and running as per the MAC requirements. And that was kind of for a reason. Like we needed, like our positions were added for ESPN, which was great. And I had the pleasure of working with two grad assistants specifically for the digital media and production side these last 2 years. And, it's definitely helped it be more sustainable, but it's, I have a lot of OCD, so I've gotten there plenty early enough to make sure everything's up and running too. There's no worse feeling than, these last 8 years, 9 years I've worked in college sports. You always want to be a problem solver. You want to figure, especially during the middle of a game. Christ, I've had scoreboards go out, in a lacrosse game before, and I'm up there doing the PA and the stats and like counting out whenever there's, a minute left or 10 seconds left. But in broadcast production, when that starts and you're dealing with an ESPN production truck that you've never used before, up until last year, you just want to make sure you have everything up as buttoned down as you can. So for me, knowing my OCDs and that I've overseen the graphics, this last year in particular, I'm the one doing that in the games. Like you can build up the graphic templates during the week, so that might take, an hour here and there. But then certainly on game days, we wanted to make sure, at least last year when we were playing in our own gym, which is another story I'll mention before I conclude here. We primarily did basketball last year with the exception of a couple soccer games for the playoffs. But, for a basketball show, a 7 o'clock start, we get our cameras up kind of after lunch just to have them up and running. I don't know if I've said it out loud here, but we have basically a Sprinter van that's a production truck that we just pull up and plug in. We don't have a control room on campus. I know that's a very similar thing that other schools in the MAC have as well. So it's not like I can turn the cameras on and go into the control room. If the van is on the other side of campus where it's normally parked, I don't know if we're actually seeing it. So get the cameras up, get audio up, and then, I would probably bring the van around at least 3 hours before, do all your equipment faxing, do your transmission, ESPN said an hour before. I would piss them off a couple times by calling an hour and a half before. And I get it, they've got a lot going on, but that's just me and my OCDs wanted to make sure they've got us loud and clear. I think the most stressful part every day is the damn encoder. Basically the equivalent of the satellite on top of the truck that is now a little 2x4 rectangle that sits in the back, and hopefully it works. But that's more or less it. This year, our wonderful gym was being renovated all year long. The powers that be, I am not a power at B. The people that make the choices on campus said, "Oh, we're going to wait till July to break ground. So we'll have it up and running for January." No, so we had to play at a D3 school down the street, about a mile away. that more or less didn't let us into the building until 2.5 hours before game day. So, I wired as much as I could, before the season started, basically taping things to walls and hoping nobody pulled it down. And it was just a mad dash, and of course, Kyle, the schedule format this year, and Dave, the backers, the Friday, Saturday. So ours were, the 24-hour apart rule with the MAC. And when you're the lowest priority tenant in a building that you're renting, and they have, men's and women's basketball, men's and women's volleyball, men's and women's wrestling, they've got every sport on the planet playing out of this one gym. We would have 8 p.m. starts every weekend, 24 hours apart. So again, what was the first thing I said? You got to embrace that grind. And it was kind of a crazy winter for sure, but we got it done one way or another.
And they looked good too.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
They looked great.
Lighting was great in there, better than the damn Yanatelli.
So before it gets too stressful sounding of a sports broadcasting job, we'll go into the next question of, what is your favorite part about your job? And I know Chris's answer is not the damn encoder.
That's not mine either.
Probably nobody's.
Listen, I love sports. I've loved sports since I was 4 years old. If you're going to pay me to watch a sporting event, I couldn't dream of a better job. And it doesn't matter to me if I'm doing the MAC. It doesn't matter to me if I'm doing SEC, ACC, or FCS football. It's a sporting event. There's competition. And the great thing to me is you have no clue what's going to happen. No clue. And you also have no clue how the game could be delayed too. It could be delayed in any sort of ways or means. So the great thing is it always keeps you on your toes. It's never boring, because as soon as you say, God, this is boring, bam, something's going to happen to wake you back up, put you back in your place, and then you're going to be like, I really wish I didn't say that. So that's the thing that I like.
Sorry, Kyle. I've always loved storytelling. I've always loved sports. And thankfully, the last, when I fell into the athletic communications of college athletics side of things, it was, I was able to combine the two of those over the last decade or so. And then, the last two at St. Peter's, I was able to combine, what I went to school for back in the day, my what I thought was going to be a very useless, and still kind of is, broadcast journalism undergrad. Oh, that's so smart. Finally, I got back into a control room setting, live sports production. Like it was awesome when these games are happening and I'm sitting in a Mercedes Sprinter van with all these screens all over the place with the switcher over there, the replay machine over there, the graphics machine over there. It's a blast. It's where I definitely am having the most fun working alongside my GAs and our students. And we're still a very fledgling operation. I want to get more students involved. Hopefully I have an equivalent of this class at St. Peter's lineup in the fall that I might be an adjunct for, because we're still trying to build, I look at what Monmouth has, what Ryder has, Kyle, Dave, without knowing, how much student involvement you have there. Obviously you have a lot of sports, so I'm sure you have a ton. Like I'm sure you have a great showing too, but when you go down to Atlantic City and you see Ryder bring their way to kids, Monmouth, Quinnipiac, etc., Manhattan, like we're trying to do that. I was able to bring 2 students to Atlantic City this year, and I thought that was awesome. And I'd like to get to a point where we're bringing upwards of 10 and have a really student sufficient all across the board outside of talent operation. And we're close to there, including my GAs, but next year would love to get a student in there to at least run graphics or the switcher, take something off our plate. And that's the coolest part too, really trying to make an impact, because there's really no broadcast or digital specific communications undergrad offering on campus. So if I can latch on to, 1 or 2 kids that really love it and can try and make a career out of it, that'd be awesome too. But as much as negative as I've sounded, I'm trying not to be. When the lights go on and when the games are happening, it's awesome. Because like Dave said, you literally have no idea what can happen. It's really unbelievable. And the technology at our hands now and being able to direct and produce these shows, it really is so much fun.
There was a game this year, Dave, you weren't there for it, but I was directing a women's soccer game to kind of go off of like the excitement of a game. And for the life of me, I wish we had a camera in the studio when this girl scored a goal, because the room went nuts. It was a fantastic goal. It was an absolute really nice shot. And those are the moments that become really fun, because when something really cool happens, the whole team gets on board and is like, who's got the best replay angle? How can we make this look cooler than it already was? And that's what's really fun about it. And we've had a couple of those moments. Like last year, we had a couple of insane basketball buzzer beaters, and those were a ton of fun to cover, figure out, and how are we going to execute getting this out, moving forward on the night of, and hopefully get on top 10. For me, it's hard for me. I kind of laugh thinking even this comment, but I really like my job because I am working with students and it makes me feel young. I'm only 2 years removed from Niagara. I understand I'm still kind of young, but I know, but I know as I get older and I keep doing this, I'm going to appreciate it more and more and more because it'll make me feel young. And it's really, really satisfying to watch particular students start from absolutely no experience at all to ending up on the switcher TDing. I didn't think I would have a kid technical directing a show for like 3 or 4 years. And there's one on this call that did earlier this year. He's there, he's smiling. And it's cool to see them learn alongside myself, because I'm sure Dave and Chris can also respond to this. I don't know everything. I sure as heck don't know everything in this broadcasting world. I'm still trying to get my feet wet in what I'm doing. But every day, I'm sure you guys learn something new. Like, oh, I could do that, and it's fun for me because makes me feel younger than I am. And you're on your toes. You just never, ever know what's going to happen, ever. A lot of surprises.
Yeah. The remark about you feel good for the other people in the crew, like especially the students, especially my 2 grad assistants who are, one's a TD director, the other one's been doing replay the last 2 years, and that's kind of how it was. But like, I love those moments both during the game, when you're complimenting a camera, when you go back, you're watching replay live, your replay op just nails it on the right spot during an official review. Yes, Ryan, that's it. That's perfect. Leave it there. You love the camera, camera 3 had an amazing shot. I'll get on the horn. I'm normally not talking to them all game because I'm not directing, but I love going out of my way to compliment when they nail something. Or conversely, if they screw something up, I usually tell the camera folks you're only going to hear from me for the really, really good or really, really bad. But like those moments, or even like I was watching, it wasn't against, I think our men's soccer team, they beat someone in overtime this year. It actually was a game that was on ESPN and actually made it all the way through transmission. I think it was Quinnipiac, but like, you don't realize how awesome it was in the moment. And then I'm watching the archive, just the ending sequence, just our sign off, just from the moment that the goal was scored. We only have 3 cameras. So how she cycled through cameras 2 and 3, how we just went off the air. Like it was so good for just a school produced year 2, like the 4th or 5th soccer game we ever did. And like, I just, had to text, my 2 GAs, like, you guys absolutely crushed it. Cause at that point, I'm walking the town through the sign off. I've got the logger in my ear telling them, hey, we're about to, do the rollout melt. You don't really notice it in the moment. And then when I watch the next day, like those moments are, it sounds cheesy or cliche, but they're awesome.
Yeah. There's no better feeling than leaving the night of and knowing that your show was good. Mm-hmm. Like if you can make it through a show mistake free, that is the best feeling in the world leaving that night, because that people at home were able to see your product. And that's another thing, is that some of these lower Division 1 schools kind of get a bad rap. Oh, nobody's watching. That's not true. There's a lot of people watching. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people will see your mistakes if you make them. So that's kind of, I don't mean to put pressure on, there's a ton of people that made me see my mistake. We are going to make mistakes. We're human. It happens. But even like what Chris said, if you can get one segment down and that was awesome, that's a great feeling. I love when we have a really good open. So some of the kids are probably going to laugh at me, but I start clapping, like, great open. Let's have a good show. Just trying to encourage everyone, like, hey, that was awesome, but we still got to finish it, right? But it's a great feeling. I'm sure Dave has had plenty of flawless shows because he's been around long enough.
There's no such thing as a perfect show.
No such thing. Yep.
Not going to happen. So you do the best you can. And when you make a mistake, you move on from the mistake. Because remember, that mistake that you might have made in the open, nobody's going to remember if there's a buzzer beater or a game-winning goal at the end. Nobody's going to remember that mistake that you made in the open. They're only going to remember how you covered the end of that game. So that's what you really need to make sure you do right. Because if you make a mistake in covering the end of a game, that goes on the air. And it might go on ESPN. And I remember our first year at Niagara, I wasn't producing and directing, but one of my best friends was. And he made a major mistake with a buzzer beater at Niagara. And the replays weren't the best. But what ESPN did to bail Niagara out, actually, is they took the melts that was sent and actually aired the proper angle of the melts, which wasn't shown during the broadcast, but they showed it during SportsCenter. So
Made it on top 10. It's
was
okay.
great.
I don't know what the problem is.
And it wasn't you, it was Bettina.
I know.
So yeah, so it's always, you know, they always say it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And that's very, very true in this business.
I totally thought Kyle was getting called out there.
No.
I was getting entertained. for a second.
I do remember. So we had bi-weekly calls last year, and I do remember the request came in. Can you please clip like this 2-3 minute segment of your buzzer beater? And I just knew right away what it was going to be shown for.
Yep. And you know why I said that? Because I watched SportsCenter. It looked fabulous on SportsCenter. I thought you guys nailed it.
No.
And then when you sent the clip, Steve calls me and says, they screwed it up. They didn't nail it. And I was just like, you know what? They did. I can't believe it. But it didn't look like that on SportsCenter. So
No. I forget who was camera that day, but it was a great shot. But yeah, we didn't show it.
right. And it's not like you didn't have it. You had it. You
We
just didn't
had
show
it. Yeah.
If Michael was on replay, he would have shown it.
I'm gonna say to our next. I really hoped you were calling out Kyle for a second. That would have been entertaining. Sorry, Kyle.
That's okay.
I'll get us going into our next question here. So how does everyone go about incorporating your sponsors into your broadcasts?
That completely depends on what they are.
It's a broad
okay?
question.
So there's so many, to be completely honest with you, Kyle and Chris are a little bit lucky in the fact that, to be honest, the school should be doing a whole lot more with sponsorship and advertising, and they really should. It's not like we don't have a decent amount. We have a decent amount. Let me just tell you a quick little story. I interviewed once for the Boston Red Sox director job. I'm a Yankees fan. I didn't tell them. But when I interviewed for the director's job, the executive producer said to me, how are you with sponsorships and items? And I said, well, I just did a Tennessee Titans game. We've got about 25, 30 items we deal with. And he looked at me blank face and said, we have 99 sales items every show. That's 11 an inning, okay? And they find a way to get it done. So when you talk about sponsorships, I think they've got it down, and they sell everything. Pitching changes, changes in the lineup. They've got managers' decisions. They sponsor everything. But the one thing that I will say is most of the sponsorships that I deal with are mostly graphic related. They're sometimes video related, but they're more graphic related than everything. I do like the idea, though, of sponsoring like a soundbite, getting a soundbite from a coach before the game. And this is what the coach said. That's a great idea. But it's not something usually that I've found that we've done, even at the big levels. I've never had a soundbite sponsored, even when I've done major ESPN shows.
Chris, are you guys a part of Van Wagner as well?
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Okay.
They were
So-
in theory supposed to make it easy, but
we're with Van Wagner and they do a really good job with us. So basically the two correspondents that are our representatives, they tell me what they got and I do my best to try to fulfill it. That's really kind of the extent of the sponsorships that I know. I would admittedly, I'd love to do a much better job with sponsors next year. Something that we got to get better on our shows. Some of it my fault, some of it not my fault, right? But you just want to get better at it. But that's kind of what happens for me. Occasionally they will reach out and ask us about viewership numbers or any maybe sort of data analytical type stuff that we may have that will help in their pitch to companies like, hey, we really want you to be our, I don't know, timeout sponsor or whatever, or our starting lineup sponsor or final 5 minutes, right? So I try to give them as much information as I can. They will come back to me with what they have, what they think they have, and I will do the best that I can to fulfill it. And the hardest thing sometimes is you may think that every sponsorship is easy to fulfill, and sometimes they're not. I can't think of like a good example in my head where I'm thinking this, but sometimes they're trickier to figure out when you're going to place them in a show than others, right? I wouldn't have imagined that an MLB game has 99 different, sponsor elements. But now that Dave said it, I'm kind of like in my head, like, yeah, like I'm a Cubs fan. And if I sit down to watch a Cubs game, they're every at bat, it seems like. And they do a great job of they do overwhelm you with it, but they do a good job of getting it in and not making you feel overwhelmed. I don't know. That's kind of how our sponsorship kind of entails. I think a great place to find unique sponsorship integration or creativity is in any minor league sport. They will do the craziest thing to fulfill a sponsorship, and they're brilliant marketers when it comes to that and sponsorships wise. So there have been times where I've seen something and I'll bookmark it on Twitter, and these are summer conversations like this was a cool idea. Maybe we should try this, right? So that's kind of from my world. I don't know what Chris's world is now that they're not with Van Wagner. So Van Wagner, for those of you that don't know, is like a third party kind of like sales team. We don't have specific people on campus for our athletics related stuff, but they will do it for us on behalf of us, if that kind of makes sense.
I'm glad it works for you. And that's not to downplay. It just didn't work out, and it is what it is. Obviously, they're a major partner with the league, and that was probably the biggest when I produced all the women's games, at least through the quarterfinals this year at the MAC basketball championship. That's what I wanted these last 2 years. Getting the 5 or 6 elements, and that's such a low number, especially after what Dave said. But those 5 or 6 scripted elements are what they want. Just teed up for you, and you just build it out, and it takes a little bit of work, but. Trevor, to answer your question, I mean, almost anything outside of the scorebug is sponsorable as far as elements go, at least for graphics. If like every single template for the most part has a place to plug in a sponsor. So it's like Kyle said, just being smart about it, not overwhelming, your fans about it. Obviously you can have the billboard reads where you just have a 5-second scripted thing for, the tagline for a company. You want to do 2, 3, 4, 5 of them just coming out of a break. Sure. That's obviously a common one. You can have, starting lineup sponsored by this, keys to the game sponsored by that, your out of town score sponsored by this. Some are just it's just automatic. It makes sense to have them, and it's more or less, do you have someone within your institution, whether inside athletics or like a third party like Van Wagner, that is helping you ink those partnerships, or is it something you do yourself? And it's something I'm going to be trying to do a little bit more of this summer, now that we're taking it more in house, at least at St. Peter's. But you can, I mean, if somebody's going to, even if it was $500 and just, 10, $50, $10 gift cards that we use as a marketing promotion, I'll put you at the bottom of my site, and I'll put you anywhere, an on-air billboard, during the game, because quite frankly, at St. Peter's, beggars can't be choosers. We're trying to build more partnerships there and sponsorships. So just about anything is on the table.
There are commercials I'll remember forever after this year. Repeat. Yep.
Oh, I can agree to that. I'm sick of about half of them. Hey, at least I know what's going on. So I'll get us right into the next question here. So how much research in preparation goes into being ready to call a sporting event? So I know that's not as much what you guys will deal with, but do you have any knowledge as to what would kind of go into that? And if there's a lot of research pregame?
It kind of pertains to us. Dave brings sheets every game he directs, and it's all mapped out. I'll let him.
Yeah, I mean, and you guys are more talking really announcers with this question than producers. Am I correct with that? Okay, so that's what I thought. So it ties in with both because it's a team production, okay? Every member of the team is important, but the producer is the head of the team. Okay, the producer is the one on the cruise ship making sure you don't go into the iceberg so the Titanic doesn't sink. Okay, so the producer's job is to make sure the announcers know what they're talking about. Okay, so the producer has to talk to the announcers well in advance of the game, not only to let them know, obviously, what time they need to be there, but how are we going to do this? How are we going to do the open? What are we going to do for halftime? What are we going to do for post game? And he's setting the tone, or she is setting the tone on all of the content that's going to be shown. Okay. So the announcers need to know that because they're the ones that relaying the content to you, the viewer, whether it's a stream or whether you're watching it on television. Okay. So that needs to start. I usually bother Kyle a week in advance. He's might be doing another production and I'm sending him a text. Who are the announcers? I need to know because I need to send an email out to the announcers and to all the sports information people to let them know sports information, these are our announcers and they need the info. Because if they don't have the information, they can't get it to you, the viewer at home. So it starts about a week in advance. That's when I'll usually start. And then usually 3 days in advance, I'll have the open pretty much mapped out unless there's a game after that. But usually by the previous game, I've got it mapped out exactly what we want to do in the open. But then again, I said it's a team process. So if the announcers come back to me and say, hey, you weren't there for the last game. This person had a really good game. Let's change the focus to this person. I'm totally fine with that. It's completely open-ended. So I will make the suggestions because it's my responsibility to as the producer, but it's open-ended. We can certainly change it up, and everybody has their say in it. I am not one to say, no, we're doing it this way. No, it should be best idea wins. So
the old adage for at least play-by-play was, you put in, if the show is 2.5 hours long, you double the work in terms of research. I wouldn't necessarily say it's that long. Listen, we are blessed, or at least I feel blessed to have, announcers that are doing that much research. And then obviously the athletic communications personnel, traditionally called SID, sports information directors, the ones that are doing game notes that 3 people read. But guess what? I might be one of those 3 people. Dave might be one of those 3 people. You can find some nuggets in there that you could turn into a graphic that, as you talk to your broadcasters, your play-by-play and your analyst over the course of a week leading up to the game, you could say, hey, here's a menu, maybe, this is segment, this could be one of the under 8s, the under 16, whatever. You pick and choose if we think or you can build out graphics and not use them at all. Like, that's the beauty sometimes and the beast of how a show goes. If someone that you build out a graphic for gets hurt early on, you're not going to talk about them all game long. Like, it is what it is. Definitely nailing that open, or having that open be what you want it to be. That's probably where I spend the most time preparing for at the start of the season. But at least this year in particular, once we nailed that first, format and we knew what our rundown wanted to be, at least for a show open, it really didn't change much outside of, maybe here and there. And that's fine because we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We liked what we were doing. And at the end of the day, the show was more important than the open, and obviously the 40 minutes of the game itself.
Yep.
And all, you just, like Dave said, being flexible. You can map, it's our responsibility to map out the show beforehand. But if we miss something in a play-by-play, or one of our announcers throws a stat out there or notices that someone was 3 points away from 1,000 career points, oh crap, there you go. There's your lead. There's our spotlight. There's our pregame story.
There's so much preparation that the play-by-play people go through each and every game to get on air, and you can tell that they're prepared because they're never missing a beat. And that preparation, it's much like studying for a test for them, right? You got to know your stuff about the upcoming game to do successful. And Dave is also right where it's a complete team effort on the start to do a game. And so, much like me, if I'm going to do a hockey broadcast, I'm thinking of ways to talk creatively about what's going on 5-6 days in advance if there isn't a game, beforehand. And it was tough this year, but it was also kind of a blessing in disguise to have our basketball games back to back, because that second game is so quick and you may not have some things or time to build out graphics, but at least you had the video stuff from last night you could always fall back on, right? And you always had a storyline on what happened in the game last night. So you got to roll. We've said this probably a bunch today, but we got to roll with the punches and what's given to you. And I think another cool thing, at least in our league, is that myself and Chris, there's all of us at the other schools as well. And we do work together all the time on different types of stuff. And case in point, the basketball tournament or any sort of championships, we are constantly working with each other 3-4 weeks in advance of the basketball tournaments, right, Chris, Dave? I mean, we're sending any tidbit that we may have. We were getting emails this year, any type of player, do they have an interesting story? Can we share that story? Right? Because this whole thing that we're technically doing is storytelling. There is an art to this to get from start to finish. And it's a complete team effort. And it's a team effort from people you wouldn't even think are on your team, right? We're constantly working with people that are the opponents to make sure that we have a smooth transition. Chris, hey, our teams are playing today. Can you cut me highlights? Sure thing, Kyle. I got it, right? So we can use those for the next day. It's amazing the willingness that people have to help each other, not only in your own department, but in other departments across the league and outside the league when we get back to non-conference play.
Yeah.
So I'll get us into our last question, and I hate to kind of leave it on a negative note, but how has COVID-19 changed the way that we produce and call games?
Immensely. I mean, starting with the fact that not so much with us, but if you're going broad, the amount of money you can save by having talent remote is incredible, and having the ability with the technology to have talent remote as well. So initially it seemed daunting. I mentioned it earlier, but I don't remember if it was like July or August. I emailed Chris and I was in a panic because I just did not know how I was going to space kids out, keep people safe. I was a nervous wreck. And when I talked to Chris didn't really have any answers either. So I'm like, all right, we're in this boat together. We're just going to go day by day. And this year we made it. I believe nobody that worked games for us ended up testing positive and resulting in the crew that worked that night having the quarantine. So everyone did their part. It just made it tougher on our end. There's no easy way to put it. It just made it tougher. It made setups harder because of like restricted zones and kind of like bubbles within bubbles. Like perfect example, we had a camera that I really liked in the corner at hockey. But the way the wire ran to get to that camera goes right over the door to the away locker room. So we scrapped it because, we don't want our crew potentially ruining the opponent's season, because we know all it took was a little bit of time and boom, there's a positive. So we scrapped that idea entirely. So it just took a lot of remapping, a lot of rethinking. But at the end of the day, I thought we did a fantastic job with the requirements that was given to us.
Yeah, I think that, everybody did the best job that they could with it. But I will say that the negative, the huge negative, is really for the announcers. To try and call a game off a monitor at home when you don't hear the sounds of the game, when you don't have your full range of motion with your eyes to see everything, and you're completely dependent on that monitor in front of you, is really, really tough. Watch a Yankees game when they're on the road. When the Yankees hit a home run, it's almost like a delayed call because Michael K isn't there. He doesn't know if that ball's going to go out, and he won't call it until it actually does go out because you can't afford to make that mistake. So as far as announcers go, it's had a really detrimental impact. They really need to be there to call it. Now, the one thing that I thought the MAC did great was, our announcers, were they on the court? No, but they were in the building. And just to be in the building is just, it changes everything.
Night and
Because
day.
even though you're not on the court, you still get to see everything. You still get to hear everything. So it makes your job that much easier. I'll tell you the truth. If I was a play-by-play announcer, I'd rather be working for one of the schools than working for one of the networks and being at home. They are not doing them any favors whatsoever. And, talk about technology. 2 weeks ago, I had a Vanderbilt spring game, and both my announcers were working from home. And we had a game where there were no numbers, just names on the back of the jersey. Think of trying to call that. And they did the best job they could, and they did a really good job. Here's the only problem. Internet. You use the internet for them to be able to call. So if their internet goes bad, it sounds warbly. It sounds like there's a bad internet connection. And that's what happened to us during the show. The whole second half, our play-by-play guy sounded like he had marbles in his mouth. And there wasn't anything you could do about it because it was all dependent on that internet connection. So again, there's your perfect example. If he was there, if he was on site, we never would have had that problem. But because he was at home, he sounded like he had marbles in his mouth. So has there been negatives? Oh yeah, there's been negatives. But the biggest thing that Kyle and Chris have said, and I have done this for the last 30 years, is you overcome problems, okay? You become problem solvers. So whatever way you can use to solve the problem, you solve the problem. And that's really what it's all about. And everybody did that this year with COVID.
The play-by-play angle's really underrated. And now that I think about it, it's actually a great thing that the MAC, really pushed for at least the basketball championship. And, the first 3 or 4 days, whatever it was, until the semifinals and the outer crew comes in and it switches over from, me and Manhattan's vans producing with MAC talent, the Marist and, whoever it was doing the women's games, and then the guy from Monmouth and other people doing the men's games. And those people know those teams, they know the MAC, they know it so well. And then you almost feel bad for, whatever the network names were, but they're calling it at home, the semifinal switch over. The person that was doing play-by-play for one of the women's semifinals called Marist's mascot wrong. They call them the Red Wolves or something, but it's like, yeah, that's an obvious one that you could have chosen, but it's like, how much more are they dealing with trying to at least accurate? And it was a brain fart of the moment, but it's like, I felt for them. And I had nothing to do with the semifinals and finals productions, but I kind of just popped into the truck and you just see the camera on them in their offices at home. And they just got to grind through those 6 games, whatever it was, between the semis and the finals. And then, Dave's story there, it sounds like a horror story, but what can you do? At the end of the day, you got to tell these stories. And Trevor, that's what we were doing all winter. I would say the most obvious changes, obviously, for us, we were playing at a D3 gym, but kind of thankfully there was an elevated running track above it. So that's where all my cameras were. There were no cameras on the floor if you didn't have the minimum 25 feet or whatever it was that the league said. So gone were 2 of my favorite shots. I'm sure 2 of everyone on this call's favorite shots. Your camera 3 and 4 underneath the basket, especially for the buzzer beaters. But it is what it is. You do a reverse angle from up top and you make it work. No interviews because we didn't have the means to socially distance them, at least until we got to the MAC tournament. And that was what it was too. And, the biggest thing that took a mental grind, and this is on me, nobody saying this, I feel bad for our players and our teams and the other teams involved as well. We never had somehow a positive test among our men's and women's student athletes, but we had a lot of shutdowns because of contact tracing, because other teams going on pause, this and that. I think our men's team went through weeks without a game. And we started, entering December, we all map out our personal schedules, our work schedules, and I was ready to be working, Friday, Saturday nights or Saturday, Sunday nights, MAC basketball doubleheader productions every weekend from December 8th through, early March outside of Christmas. And, some days, I had a lot more free weekends in the beginning, and then it became backloaded at the end. And then I've got, two weekends in a 3-weekend span where it's, double headers on Friday and Saturday or Saturday and Sunday. And, you just got to try and avoid that burnout. But that was probably something that we kind of knew was going to happen, but that was a challenge. But at the end of the day, we got through whatever it was, 18, 20 home productions, and nothing didn't air. We got through it.
We're almost there. We're almost there. Did I hear you correctly? You said no student athletes tested positive.
Don't know how, Kyle.
That's
at the end of this day.
That's amazing.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Our one men's shutdown that was involved with us was because we played Canisius and it was contact tracing, but no positives came out from our team after that. And then the other shutdowns, at least on the men's side, was other teams, Iona, Siena, whatever it was. It was crazy.
Wow.
So I'll consider that ending on a positive note. So, Chris, David, and Kyle, thank you very, very much for being here. And thank you to all of our students for being here. But I will shoot it back to Skylar to kind of wrap things up for us. So thank you guys again.
Yeah, absolutely. Just the same thing Trevor had to say. Thank you guys for being here. Does anyone else have any questions? I know we're kind of going past.
Don't be afraid to ask questions. Do not be afraid to ask questions.
No one?
Mike's smiling. He's got a question.
I already hear you talk enough, Kyle.
Well, if that is that, then that's it. Thank you, David, Chris, Kyle. Thank you guys for being here, and you, the rest of you students, have a good night. And you guys are good to go. Thank you. All right.
Thank you
Thank you
all
for
for
the
being here
opportunity.
so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Great seeing you, Chris. Take care.
You as well, Dave. Take care, everyone.
Yeah, take it easy, Chris. Thanks.
Kyle, stay safe up there. Best of luck through the spring.
Yeah.